Okay, giving everybody an opportunity to get in tune here. It's about 1 minute until showtime. I start a minute or two early so everybody can get acquainted to the live feature. It should be showing now. Um, and we'll just kind of keep just chit-chatting here for a minute and let everybody get caught up to it. Hopefully it's working and everybody's going. It's now 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and start the podcast. Good evening, everybody. This is Marty from Dawgs blog with the tonight's podcast on the Frank Carson et al. Trial on October 17, 2018. The morning session was, we had the motion on that mannequin issue. The noontime report is up. Tom's report is up. So that's all there if you want to go look at that. And the judge, again, kind of split the baby like she likes to do. So, so they both kind of won on, both sides kind of won on that one. So the jury was up this afternoon around 1:33. They were in the courtroom. 1:35, the judge was on the bench. Corey Brown was back on the stand, and Marlissa Ferreira was still doing direct with Corey Brown, and talking about some of the pictures. And these were the satellite, Google Images satellite pictures that he had gotten from Google. Yeah, somebody just told me I'm live. Yes, I know that. Thank you. And these were Google satellite images. There was a satellite view of 839 9th Street, and also a pop and cork that they were going through today. One picture was taken. These were mostly on 9th Street that he was looking at this afternoon, and one was taken on March 24th, 2014. And the other one was taken on March 30th, 2015. They were talking about the above the garage and the balcony area. And she kept referring it to as a flat surface on the garage area. And she asked him if it was changed in all the pictures. Of course they hadn't. Talking about a cylindrical object that is in an earlier picture, but not in the later pictures. So there's something on the property there by the garage or somewhere in that area. I didn't see where she was talking about. He's using the laser pointer to look at the pictures on the overhead. He has hard copies and the laser pointer pointing at the overhead. And I did not see where he was pointing to sometimes. So, and I did miss that one. He says that particular trailer or whatever it is only shows in 2011 and 2012 pictures. He does not recall seeing that particular object, whatever it is, because he didn't seem to know, in August of 2012 when he was on the property. In the pop and cork yard, he was talking about a gray area that he pointed out in 2013, and there was another area that was brown in color that was different from some of the other earlier pictures. Some of these pictures were taken during the winter when there may be some rain or whatever. Of course, we were going through the drought there, and some of these pictures were taken in the summertime. There's no consistency to it. It's just whenever Google Images take these pictures. And so there could have been just dry grass out there. He had been to the Pop and Cork in the backyard at Pop and Cork on 8/15 of 2015. That's the infamous Robert Woody walkthrough. He didn't know the distance from the fence that he was to that area that he said that Robert Woody pointed out. And he's looking at a picture that's from 8 to 10 to 12 miles up, whatever it is. I don't know. It's somewhere in that area. Uh, and there was multiple questions in that and multiple sustained objections as Marlissa Ferreira just couldn't quite get the questions out. There was a sidebar. The jury was sent out of the room at 1:54. So they were in 21 minutes. Judge Aniga decided to ask Corey Brown some questions herself out of the presence of the jury, because they're really not sure what's going to be said here. And he was she asked him about going to the property at Poppencourt and asking him to show the area where the digging occurred. She wanted to see where the digging occurred, where Robert Woody pointed it out, where they he said they put the body. Corey Brown was then sent out of the courtroom. The defense was saying from that satellite picture, Corey Brown, they're not really sure. He did not seem real sure from that picture on where it was pointed out. And he's trying to say it's one spot, but the defense is saying if you look at the video, it's a different spot. So I haven't had close examination of the video. I have seen these pictures, so I don't know. Corey Brown was there in 2015, and the photo that they're looking at, the Google Images photo, the satellite photo, is a 2013 photo. So, Percy Martinez is saying that Corey Brown couldn't have known for sure, or exactly what he had seen or what it looked like 2 years prior to that. Judge Aniga noted that the officer was not there in 2000. She said 15, but he was actually 2000. He was not there in 2015, but he was there in 2015. Hans stated that Marlissa Ferreira in the video was there that day. But he's saying the hole is not where the DA is pointing to, and is not where Robert Woody had pointed to also. Now he's talking about when she pointed to in the picture in the courtroom. And there's Robert Woody at the scene. They did a walkthrough on that day in August 15th of 2015, and Robert Woody pointed to where things were. Jai Gohil noted that Robert Woody is pointing to where there's other debris located on the property. Jai Gohil is very familiar with that property, and is not where the DA is going to in the picture on the overhead. He's basing that on the video that was provided in discovery of the walkthrough in August of 2015. Percy Martinez says the video that not this picture, but the video of the walkthrough in 2015, they're much closer to the wall than is what is being indicated in the court on the overhead today. In 2013, he said also that Corey Brown was not there. There seems to be some concerns about that, and I think he was only there in 2015. They're saying there's no foundation, and the judge is kind of questioning that too. The DA, Marlissa Ferreira, says the foundation was laid by the judge with the questions that she just asked, and Robert Woody pointed to that exact spot. I don't know how she can say it was the exact spot, but okay. Judge Aniga did agree that the DA had laid a proper foundation after her questions. and she just wants the jury back. She doesn't want to deal with these issues. There's many of them that come up. She's disorientated, and she again said on the bench that she's having trouble remembering things. She said it again today. So the jury finally did come back at 2:05 p.m. So they were out about 11 minutes. I guess that would be it. And Marlissa Ferrer went back with her direct on Corey Brown. He talked about in August of 2015 at the Pop and Cork property. He was there to assist with the dig that was being done by Department of Justice in the back lot. He says the dig was in the same general area, and he did point to the back fence line with his laser pointer up onto the overhead. He was also a wiretap supervisor in 2012, and the Robert Woody Daljeet Atwal phone call is what got some things in motion in a wiretap. He said he learned some information that led to them to Pop and Cork. John Evers had gone to Pop and Cork with Corey Brown on July 11th, 2012. Remember that date. Keep that in the back of your head. July 11th, 2012. They were there at Pop and Cork around 10 a.m. He looked at the report. He didn't write the report. John Evers did. He looked at the report. It said 10 a.m. He observed Baljeet Atwal at the counter and asked if there was anyone in the back. He did not recall what was asked and answered exactly how the conversation goes. He was refreshed with the transcript of his report, or he was refreshed with his report, I guess I should say. And hold on, I just dropped the mic. He was refreshed with his report, and he was at Pop and Cork looking for some private investigators who were there investigating this missing persons case, or whatever you want to call it, that they're doing on, he's saying, July 11th, 2012. There was some people, there was a person at the counter with Bobby Atwal, but not somebody that he recognized. But Baljeet said there was two detectives in the back. He said that Frank Carson had sent them to talk to Robert Woody. And he asked if they were there to talk to Robert Woody, and Baljeet said he had already talked to them. They were asking about the Frank Carson relationship. Here we go with another objection. A sidebar. Ended up with the question being, the question that she asked withdrawn about the relationship. Marlissa Ferreira asked him about the incident reviewed, and he reviewed the report that was written. It was actually written by John Evers, and he says he looked at it, and she asked him the date, and he said, well, he wrote down at 7/20 of 2013. He says, but that's the wrong date. 7/20 of 2013. He said that's the wrong date. But that's what the report says. So she says he's still saying it's July 11th, 2000. This is actually in 2012. 2012. This is just prior. July 11, 2012 is just prior to the search warrant that served on July 15th, 2012. So what they're claiming is Frank Carson sent investigators in prior to the search warrant to do his own investigation of what's going on. Okay, keep those dates in mind because it So he talked to Jack Abel and Gary Amoyan, um, and he said, and Baljeet Atwell said Frank Carson had called the night before, and they would be coming over to talk to them, including Robert Woody. Frank Carson had called about 7 p.m. the night before. The PIs were walking out from the back of the store to the front. They were in a back room or something talking to Woody or whoever. And he didn't see anybody else leave the store. He did not recall. They bounce around in subjects, and it goes very quickly. And this thing is really important on these dates, but they bounce to another subject where he said he did not recall when Kurt Bunch and Frank Navarro were on the case, or notified to be on the case with the district attorney's office. Just prior to taking everybody into custody, they were trying to establish that he was a lead investigator. He was actually conducting the briefings, and so on. So there were some things that the fireworks kind of happened a little bit. It wasn't too bad like it's been in the past. But I'm just checking my notes. Marlissa Ferrer is saying that these investigators are hired by Frank Carson prior to the search warrant being served on his property at the Poppenkork and all these other places on July 15th, 2012. They're saying this. The DA is saying this occurred on July 11th, 2012, and there's a reason I keep repeating that. They talked about Marlissa Ferrer wanted to talk about when the contracts were signed the previous Friday in regards to with the private investigators. They talked about the Corey Kaufman cell phone. They pinged it, tried to locate it. They couldn't do it. And Marlissa Ferrer, and this is all out of the presence of the jury, by the way, and the only truth is that Frank Carson had hired the investigators, and it goes to state of mind of Frank Carson during that time. She says that she was being critical of the investigators as law enforcement officers were talking to all involved, and that they should be allowed to do their job, and I don't think anybody was stopping them. But Judge Iniga says she understands what what the DA is trying to do. But the problem that she's having is Gary Amoyan and Jack Abel apparently have advised, their attorneys advised the district attorney's office, if called to the stand, they're going to take the Fifth Amendment. So if those people are not going to testify or refusing to testify, they cannot go into those areas to establish, the DA cannot go into those areas to establish the conspiracy that she's trying to establish, because there's no other way to get the information in except through those other people, through Jack Amoyan and Gary Amoyan and Jack Abel. Corey Brown cannot testify to it because that would be equivalent to 115 testimony. And if anybody doesn't know what 115 testimony is, that's when a police officer, and it's only allowed in preliminary hearings, not in trials, a police officer can testify to the conversations he has with witnesses or any involved people in the case. So he can go to court and testify to what he was told by those people. When you, in a prelim only, you go to a trial, you have to present those people to testify. An officer can't what they call Prop 115 people in a trial. Judge Iniga, looking a little confused, says she needs to think this through a little bit, but she's pretty intent on saying she's not going to be able to do this. But Marlissa kept talking, and more Marlissa talks, the more Judge listens. And Judge Inigo kept saying, no, there's a separate layer of hearsay. It's just not allowed. But she said she needs to think it through. So, Percy Martinez says it's critical that the events occurred, he says, on July 20th. It didn't occur before the search warrant. He said this occurred after the search warrant. That is why the private investigators were hired. Now, there's a distinction there. The DA is trying to show some state of mind of Frank Carson and stuff, saying it was on the 11th. When actually, according to the report, during the John Evers report, it was done, this meeting with Corey Brown and John Evers and the investigators, the private investigators, was done on the 20th, but the DA is saying the 11th. Okay, that's why those dates are important. The search warrant was done on the July 15th. So, Percy Martinez said the Frank Carson did call the Atwells on the 19th to set up private investigators go over there and talk to people. He says again, the DA is trying to show that it was prior to the search warrant, but it was not. This was not done prior to the search warrant. This all occurred after the search warrant. Remember, the DA kept saying it goes to Frank Carson's state of mind. This witness is not clear on the date. Marlissa Ferreira argued she never brought up the search warrant. Well, she was referring to it, but she didn't actually, no, she didn't bring it up. She was trying to bring up Jack Abel information. Zuniga said the jury may think it's prior to the search warrant with Frank Carson is hiring private investigators. Judge Zuniga saying, no, we're not, at this point is leaning, no, we're not going to do this. It just shows a guilty state of mind on something that is the wrong date. So we took a break. The jury came up around 3, I believe it was around 3:05. And again, as the jury's coming up, Marlissa still wants to argue the state of mind in the circumstances, the totality of the circumstances that show, a consciousness of guilt by Frank Carson. Again, Zuniga repeats, the problem is that the private investigators are not testifying. It's an extra layer of hearsay. She keeps saying it, and Marlissa Ferreira doesn't want to accept it. They can be confronted because they have to be, whenever there's any type of information that comes in, it has to be able, what they call, be confronted by the defendants, have to be able the opportunity to cross-examine and confront these witnesses and question them. But she kept saying again, they're not going to be able to, they're not going to testify. It becomes too prejudicial. It appears, right now, it appears that those private investigators are agents for Frank Carson, working for Frank Carson prior to the search warrant. To the jury, that's the way it appears. Judge Zuniga also said Marlissa Ferreira haven't had. Actually, Marlissa Ferreira, and I wrote this down, and I was being a little sarcastic, but it was actually what was going on. Marlissa Ferreira and Judge Zuniga were actually having a conversation about the proper way to bring in some of this information that she wants to bring in. Judge Zuniga was giving her advice on how to do it. This is an ongoing issue in this case. And they were talking about hearsay exemptions. And Judge Zuniga said, well, I need to research it more. And it looked to me like she was trying to help in the DA's case. But what do I know? I'm a dumbass. And she also, Judge Iniga, started giving a little advice to Marlissa Ferreira on Corey Brown's testimony and the things he's saying, and the whole trips and the mannequin, and then she just kind of ran the whole gamut on everything. I guess she was really enjoying what she was doing. Jai Gohil was getting a little frustrated. I saw him starting to wiggle in his seat a little bit, and he asked the court, does the defense get to chime in regard to all this stuff that you guys are talking about? Judge Iniga says, well, not now. She needs to think about it, but she's sitting there talking to Marlissa Ferreira for 10 minutes about this stuff. She also admitted on the bench during this time, she was just kind of talking to herself. She was kind of mumbling on into the microphone, and she said she's getting more confused in these things. She said it outright. She's getting confused, and it's obvious that she is. Marlissa Ferreira and Judge Iniga then started talking about Corey Brown again, and telling her to present. They were talking about this time about the mannequin and the trajectory of the bullets and the jacket and all that stuff. This has got to be done with an expert on ballistics or trajectory or whatever it is they are. This cannot be done by Corey Brown. So Marlissa Ferreira wants a 402 hearing tomorrow. And the defense says, well, okay, get your expert to give us some information tonight so we can review it for tomorrow. And that's obviously not going to happen. The defense cannot respond to an expert's report or the information without some type of the information be provided earlier so they can look at it. I mean, it's not fair to ask anybody to do that. And they need to prepare for a hearing to do that. So the jury came back up. They started to come up. They held them back in the hallway. So I said they came up earlier. They came up, but they weren't in the courtroom because this conversation continued on. And then at 3:24, the jury was back in the courtroom. Corey Brown was back on the stand. Okay, hold on. Somebody just sent me a message. Let's see what it says. Is it legal for tell a DA what questions to ask and how she could ask them? It doesn't seem right to me. You know what? As far as the legality of it is, I don't know. I don't think it's proper. It's probably not ethical. It shows a bias towards one side or the other, which has become pretty obvious anyway. So as far as ethically, I don't think it's proper. Legal, I don't know. That's for better minds than mine to figure out. So anyway, the jury's finally back up. So Percy, Marlissa Ferreira, there's those issues that have to be resolved. So she is no further questions, but she reserved on those other questions that she still hasn't. The judge needs to think about for a while, and so Percy Martinez started cross on Corey Brown, and Percy Martinez was fired up. Let me tell you, he asked him if that his testimonies that this incident occurred with the PIs on July 11, 2018. He asked him during the break if he verified if the date was actually July 20th, 2018, 5 days after the search warrant, not 4 days before. And Corey Brown did admit it was actually on the 20th and not the 11th. The DA's been saying Frank Carson's state of mind because it was prior to the search warrant. Now she's going to say the same thing because it's after the search warrant. They did a briefing prior to the search warrant. They talked about Corey Kaufman's phone not being used since 10 p.m., 3/29/2012. Anybody recognize those dates? 10 p.m., 3/29, 2012. He said that was the wrong date. But that was notes from somebody that wrote down in the briefing that Corey Brown was doing. If Corey Brown did a briefing, these were notes from somebody else, and that's going to be problematic because it's hearsay. But he said in the briefing it was March 29, 2012 when Corey Kaufman's phone was last used. The DA is now saying it's March 30th around 10 p.m. the phone was last used. So these little things that keep coming up, if they mean anything, I don't know. It seems to me they would. So Percy Martinez asked him, or Marlissa Ferrer actually objected to him refreshing his memory, and the judge said he can refresh his memory any way he sees fit. So Percy Martinez went on with Corey Brown, and he said he was advising all the agents, because there was different agencies in there and stuff, the details, and said Corey Kaufman had received no calls since 3/29 of 2012, is what it says in the notes of the officers that were at this briefing. The Main Street search warrant was a vacant house, and it belonged to Frank Carson's father, who had passed away 1 week prior to that. So the DA had represented earlier that it was Frank Carson's house. It wasn't. It was Frank Carson's dad's house, who had just passed away, and Frank Carson's mom was there fixing up the house, putting flowers and stuff, trying to make it rentable. She didn't live there. Also, Rhonda Erickson was there. She didn't live there. They also went to 127 Laurel Street that day. That's at the warehouse. But they had no warrant, so they did no search. He was asked who was on the task force on this case prior to Corey Brown's involvement. He was also asked. There was an objection to that, and I don't know why, but so then he goes into who wrote the Ramey warrant for the case on this thing too. So who was involved and who wrote the Ramey warrant? Objection to that too. Ended up in a long sidebar. So on 8/13 of 2015, he said he prepared the Ramey warrant. I don't know if he meant that was when he finished the Ramey warrant, because I remember his testimony in the prelim. He said something to the effect it took him a week to write it. So maybe that's what he meant. I don't know. In May of 2012, there was enough evidence to support a wiretap warrant. After talking to the officers he knew that was on this case. Corey Brown was brought into this case specifically to write search warrants. He's not sure when he was asked, but he was brought in on 5/6 of 2012 to write search warrants and do the wiretaps. For some reason, I guess he's a good search warrant writer or whatever. I don't know. The wiretaps ran from June 21st for 30 days. From June 21st on for 30 days. Percy Martinez was asking him when he started the wiretaps, and he says, well, we were approved on June 21st. Well, but he asked him, when did you start it? And that was an interesting question. So he finally said, well, that's when we started. It was June 21st. He's not going to admit they started a wiretap prior to having a warrant. He was not in the wire room prior to June 21st, 2012. He says there was no wire room. There's a physical wire room was in existence but not being used. There was no wiretaps being going on until June 21st. He was just gathering evidence in the case. He was asked, did he know that the district attorney's office was aware of what was going on on April 2nd, 2012. That's the day Kurt Bunch went on, when he got a call from Officer Swan, I believe his name is, from Turlock PD. He said he used the, and he says no, he was not aware. He says he used information from some of the other officers, facts that developed by the other officers, and some developed by the DA investigators for the search warrants that he wrote. Again, there was more objections, and it started getting testy again. At 3:48, the jury was sent home for the day. Now, if we do some quick math here, they came up around, what did I say, around 2:05. And then they were only up a few minutes, and they came up at 3:24. And so they had 24, they had maybe less than an hour of listening to testimony this afternoon. And the jury is returning tomorrow at 11 a.m. Not 9 a.m., 11 a.m., because they have more issues to resolve. Corey Brown, the jury was released. Corey Brown was sent out of the room. They talked about the objection, the last objection of Percy Martinez asking about the DA's involvement. And here's where it gets testy. Percy Martinez says the DA has elicited that Corey Brown, or Kurt Bunch, was called by Shaw from the Cooley property on the 2nd of April. Corey Brown used this information to write the warrants. So Kurt Bunch was the first person that was talking about the missing person case. Judge Iniga says Percy Martinez is trying to establish a bias that maybe Corey Brown cannot do. And that was an interesting point, and it's probably true. Jai Gohel argued, we cannot assume Frank Carson hiring PIs does not mean Frank Carson is responsible for their actions and what they may do. What the investigators did, investigating whatever they're doing, cannot be attributed to Frank Carson. That was their authorization to do what some of these things that they're saying they did. The DA, Marlissa Ferrer, said they will get the evidence. So, again, we're bouncing around. This all afternoon we bounced around on subjects. I think she was trying to distract from what was going on. And Percy Martinez says they can't cross the witnesses that they're talking about with Moya and Abel. And then she starts talking about the expert witness again for the tracing the bullet path. It gets a little confusing. So they got past that. Marlissa Ferreira says that she had another issue that she wanted to bring up, and she had that tone of voice. She objected to Percy Martinez talking in regards to Frank Carson's father's death. She objects and requests an admonition. And Miss Marlissa Ferrer was getting a little sassy and testy with the judge. If she had done that, she would have been yelled at extreme amount because she's held to a higher standard. She threw that back in the judge's face. Also, she said Percy Martinez used somebody else's notes to refresh Corey Brown's memory in regards to the briefing. She says it's improper, and the judge says, no, it's not. If it refreshes his memory, it refreshes memory. If it doesn't, it doesn't. She said it's made it sound like it's pretty much that simple, and I guess it is. Marlissa Ferrer said the defense is continually trying to get the jury to feel sorry for Frank Carson and these defendants. Percy Martinez argued Marlisa Ferreira elicited, what is that a word? Marlisa Ferreira elicited false testimony that Frank Carson owned the property on Main Street. He said she brought this up. This is not Frank Carson's property. It's his father's property. And he had passed away a week prior to doing it, before that. The DA knew that it was not Frank Carson's property. Marlisa Ferreira, he said, brought out the lie. And it was in those notes that they showed to Corey Brown, which helped show that lie. Marlisa Ferreira, she said she knows who owns the property, and in fact, she said she has the property records. But when they tried to clarify, the defense objected, and it was sustained. So she said she was not allowed to clarify her mistake. The DA again is complaining to the judge about her getting chided for these things. And she says Percy Martinez did it even worse. Oh, my. Judge Aniga looked at Marlisa Ferreira and she says she's advising her that she opened the door to the defense for this. And again, she opened the door for all this to happen, and then talked about her getting angry, so quick to anger on these side issues that are not that big a deal. And there's so much anger on all this stuff coming from her. She said it's getting tiresome, quote unquote. That's exactly what she said. The DA, Marlisa Ferreira, started to interrupt her, and Judge Aniga says, "Don't do it again. Don't interrupt me again." She was getting a little peeved at her. So Marlisa kind of leaned back in her chair and went into one of her little huffy fits. The district attorney put the evidence. Percy Martinez argued the district attorney put this funding issue up front. She's the one that brought it up. Somebody needs to send Marlisa Ferreira a big block of cheese to go with that wine. Yep. So Percy says the DA put the funding and the finances and all that stuff into play. Marlisa Ferreira was asking Corey Brown if he saw the funding, how it was paid for, if he was involved in it. He said he saw some things. He had to talk to his supervisors to get funding and things like that. The defense is now asking for those records that the Corey Brown was relying on. Percy Martinez said Judge Aniga did warn her, and she did, about going down that path because it opens doors. And she did warn her, but the DA continued, and now the defense is entitled to those records. Let me get my screen back up here. See where I'm at. Okay. So he says they're entitled to those records. Attorney Hans argued it's relevant now, all the funding, that's including the sheriff's office and the DA's office in this case. In the missing person case of Corey Kaufman from March 30th, 2012 to date, they want all the funding records. Jai Gohel argued the defense has not brought up all the money issues. It's been done by the DA, and she did with Corey Brown. The defense now entitled by Marlisa Ferreira's own questions that put it at issue. The Freedom of Information Acts have been made by the media, which is There has been a lot of people done it, and most recently that I'm aware of is right here from Dawgs blog. By the way, I haven't received anything back on that, and it should be just about time. Marlissa Ferreira argued the funding issue was a defense issue, as they say Frank Carson was targeted. Just because he says he's targeted doesn't mean they're funding. She brought up the actual dollars and cents. So she said Frank Carson saying that he was targeted and spearheaded the whole thing. The opinions and questions that have been brought up in regards to that issue to Corey Brown, it said prior that the sheriff's office was funding this case. Corey Brown said the sheriff's office was funding this case, so all this is not an issue. She said everything was funded by the sheriff's office till the filing of charges, which was then taken over. All funding was taken over by the district attorney's office, and that is how every other case is done. She says they are not entitled to it, and it is not relevant. Judge Aniga responded, she understands the responses by all, especially Marlissa Ferreira, but she did warn her of the pitfalls of that area that she wanted to go into, and I believe it was in a sidebar when she talked about going into that area. Defense is saying Kurt Bunch was one of the targets of the that it was a vendetta against Frank Carson. They tried to get it in through Corey Brown, that the sheriff's office, not the DA office, was involved more than the sheriff's office. But she did go into the funding issue with Corey Brown, more funding that was needed to pay for this investigation. The judge told her, you opened the door, so this could be a problem. There's going to end up being evidentiary hearing on this, by the way. Several things came up that are going to be evident. They wanted to hold one tomorrow. I don't see how they can because they don't have the information available. That's on the tracing of the bullets. Jai Gohill and Percy Martinez virtually said the same thing. That the defense has been made aware of Freedom of Information Act requests. They have personally requested this information too. The district attorney's office, like Dave Harris' response to me, was that it's private information and he doesn't have to reveal that. It's your tax dollars. It's supposed to be revealed where your money's going. It's supposed to be transparent. There are what they say is 1040 it's privileged information. There is some privileged information involved in all this, but what your tax dollars are paying for in a case like this, or any case, you have a right to know what's being spent. And the district attorney's office does not have any type of accounting on what is spent on each case. Now, I understand they can't go around having the attorneys punch time cards on everything they're doing. That wouldn't make sense either. But any competent entity will be able to say where their funding is going, especially when they're a government agency running strictly off taxpayer dollars. So Judge Aniga is telling them, advising them everybody to file formal motion. She wants it to be brief now, and let the county file a formal response. Now, Rob Taro was in the courtroom earlier, and the judge noted that he was there. So let him respond to this, and she's trying to get it out of the courtroom and let them respond to it, because she doesn't really want to do an order for them to do that. But she did say the DA did open the door, but was not sure if more could be done. So she's telling Marlissa Ferreira, and I remember her telling her, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go into these areas. You don't want to do this. And she does it anyway. Now the store is open, and now she's complaining about it. Then they started talking about some of the cadaver dogs and their scents and the way they smell and how they're handled, their handlers and such. And apparently some requests have been made by the defense in regards to the training and background and some of the other things. And they're apparently making a motion because somebody, and I don't know who, if it's the DA's office or what, is resisting turning over training records and such and background information on these cadaver dogs that were used. So the judge said the defense needs to cite some cases to the court. Basically, she's saying file a brief, I guess. It's kind of what it sounds like. So that's where we ended the day. We had it was actually a pretty calm day. Marlissa Ferreira was pretty calm this morning. In fact, I noted that in my noontime report that she was actually making some good arguments. She was respectful. She was her tone was good, and she makes good arguments when she talks like that. She doesn't talk like that often enough, is her problem. And this afternoon, she proved that she has a trouble, and the judge outright said it to her. Said it again. She's behaving badly, and she's quick to anger. And Marlissa Ferreira has been yelling at the judge and pointing her finger at her. So we'll see what all happens with this. So that's all I got. We have anybody that wants to send me a message, you can do it on Facebook. You can do it on. You can send me an email. You can, if you know my phone number, you can send a text. You can. Let me see if there are any texts on here, just to double check. No, I don't see any. No, yeah. Somebody wants me to put up an asshole poll in regards to Kurt Bunch to see if we really, if the public at large really feels that he's an asshole. And I think that's only fair to Kurt Bunch, don't you? That we put up a poll and see what people think and try to improve his standing in the community and try to help him out to be a better person and try to shake this perception that he's an asshole that some people may have. I think he can do it. I got faith in him. What do you think? Should we put up a poll? Let me know. Okay, that's all I got. Be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. with the attorneys, 11 a.m. with the jury tomorrow. Don't forget I have PayPal buttons on the bottom of each report when I remember to put them in. And somebody reminded me yesterday. I forgot on several yesterday, but they are in now. And my sponsors, Merced Tile Supply. He's got some really good stuff over there. He really does. I've had a couple people contact me about they're going to go over there and get some stuff from him too. Somebody did it today. And Doug Maynor, attorney at law, 15th and J Street at the old Masons building. Former DA, knows what he's doing. Good guy. So that's all I got. Remember what I said. Don't take my word for it. Come to court and find out for yourself. And everybody, please let me know what you think of these podcasts now in this new system, this new platform. I think the quality is incredibly better. I do miss the phone calls when I get them, but other than that, I think it works very well. So drop me a line, let me know. So that's all I got. Good night, everybody.